at Bakersfield College. He's also an award-winning scholar who researches and publishes in the field of American race and ethnicity, while also serving on the boards of several national associations. My name is Erin Miller. I'm a professor of history here, and I'm also an advisory board member of the Liberty Institute. I'll be introducing the Liberty Institute, Dr. Garrett, giving you the logistics of tonight's events, and then providing just a little background what led to Dr. Garrett's lecture tonight so that he can focus on the aspects of his talk that he would like to. So if you could indulge me for a few more minutes than I would usually like to do for an introduction so I can achieve what it is Dr. Garrett asked me to achieve, I would appreciate that. First of all, the Liberty Institute, our director, Dr. Garrett, and the advisory board would like to recognize and thank Dr. Nikki Damania, who is the director of the Office of Student Life, and Dr. Reggie Williams, who is a professor of philosophy and the director of the Levin Center where we are today. Dr. Damania and Dr. Williams are fierce supporters of our students and allowing the opportunity for the free exchange of ideas. And we appreciate and we applaud their support and their courage in these divisive times. A few quick logistical issues. This building does not have a bathroom. So if you need to use the restroom, please exit through these doors by the fine gentleman. Go to your left through the glass doors where you'll find the bathroom. Or you can exit behind you, go out of the building to your right, and then right again where the glass doors are. We do ask that you refrain from eating or drinking anything besides water. This building was a gift from the late Dr. Levin, and we want to show our appreciation by taking good care of it. Tonight's event will consist of a formal 1-hour lecture, followed by 30 minutes of question and answer. So we hope to be out of here by 7:45 or 8 p.m. This is a controversial topic, and emotions are high, if you can feel it. We imagine that there are many of you who want to comment and ask questions and be heard. In order to allow the freest exchange of as many ideas as possible, this is the format we will use for the question and answer that I will moderate. Everyone is limited to 30 seconds. We've all been to events on campus where there are 2 or 3 audience members, whether because of hubris or nerves, go on forever and ever, and nobody else gets a chance to talk. So what we've done is we've put note cards on every seat. You can write your question or comment on there. We are not going to collect it. We're not going to censor what you say or what gets asked. We're asking you to use those cards to be concise and brief and focus your question or comment so Dr. Garrett can respond and as many as you as possible can be heard. I will be clear, the expectation is civility. Attack the ideas, the evidence, the analysis. Do not attack the person or I will ask you to leave. Period. Is that clear? Okay. Freedom requires civility, and we will be civil. Okay. I'm serious, can you tell? Just a little quick background about the Liberty Institute. I mentioned that I'm an advisory board member. We were founded by Dr. Garrett and a handful of faculty a little over a year ago, largely in reaction to increasing calls to censor people on campus, as well as in reaction to an endless parade of taxpayer-funded speakers assailing Western ideals and berating the free market. The Liberty Institute aims to promote and preserve freedom of thought and intellectual literacy through the open discourse of American ideals, including economic, political, and civil freedom. The Institute emphasizes American ideals and their broader Western traditions to our historical values as a democratic republic. With an emphasis on our nation's foundational philosophies of meritocracy, civic virtue, individual agency, economic freedom. These ideologies underpin the American experiment, long serving as a bulwark, a protection against political and ideological tyranny. And as an advocate for intellectual diversity and literacy, the Liberty Institute reaffirms civic, economic, and religious freedom, upon which the Academy and the nation will either stand or fall. Through intellectual exploration and reason, the Institute works to preserve each of the above virtues as necessary for a free people and to advance the cause of liberty in America. Last year, the Liberty Institute, in collaboration with Dr. DeMagna's Office of Student Life, featured two seminal speakers. Dr. Carol Swain, a prolific political scientist whose most recent book, Black Faces and Black Representation, Congressional Representation of African Americans in Congress. And philosopher Dr. Christina Hoff Sommers, author of The War on Boys and Who Stole Feminism. We invite you to join with the Liberty Institute as supporters, attendees, partners, and benefactors. So you also found on your seat a little yellow handout with QR codes in our website. So whether you agree or disagree with the mission of the Liberty Institute, we invite you to attend our events. That's the whole purpose. We want to invite people who disagree with each other so that we can be ideologically and intellectually literate. So sign up, be a benefactor, be an attendee, so we can hold additional events going forward. I have two last things to achieve before I bring Dr. Garrett up. One is an introduction to the talk. Two is what transpired as a result of trying to organize this talk. A series of events at the end of the last academic year and over the summer illustrate the urgency of the Liberty Institute's mission. In April of 2019, unauthorized stickers appeared around campus, including one damaging or vandalizing an event posters. The stickers contained phrases that some would say challenged ideas increasingly officially endorsed and espoused by Bakersfield College. Other faculty members described the stickers as racist, given their site of origin, and the vandalism as a hate crime. These faculty pressured campus administration to take official action. As a result, a controversy erupted when my colleague, Dr. Garrett, publicly questioned the atypical behavior of our college administration. He questioned whether the stickers actually might be protest speech, protesting the use of taxpayer funds to push a one-sided partisan agenda on our campus. Faculty administrators of the BC Social Justice Institute and student authors closely aligned with them responded with defamatory public and private accusations about Dr. Garrett, referring to him as an apologist for white supremacy and characterizing me as somebody who wishes to engage white supremacist ideas on campus. Tonight, Dr. Garrett will explore the ways in which education previously intended to preserve freedom of thought and intellectual rigor has increasingly become a place where some partisan faculty pushing social justice agendas attempt to silence those who challenge or disagree with them, while simultaneously silencing people with fear of such accusations before they are yet to even speak. Campus faculty, students, and our community engaged in this debate in our local newspaper. Dr. Reggie Williams, Dr. Nick Strobel invited Matt Garrett and Professor Andrew Bond, one of the individuals arguing the other side, to host a public formal debate on campus. What a better example of intellectual rigor than to have two professors discuss the merits of censorship and free speech. Dr. Garrett readily agreed. Professor Bond sent a list of several stipulations. Dr. Garrett agreed to all of them. I think there were 8. A few days later, Professor Bond regretfully informed those involved that he'd be unable to participate because he was too busy. He teaches a lot of classes. So Dr. Williams, ever eager for us all to debate each other philosophically, reached out to instructor Octavio Barajas, inviting him to engage the topic, as Barajas was the one who led the call for campus members to report each other to campus law enforcement for inappropriate comments. Barajas declined. Dr. Williams reached out to the original founder of the BC Social Justice Institute, Dr. Oliver Rosales. Rosales agreed, tentatively, saying that the date would need to be changed, pushed back a week till next Thursday, and that it really depended, because I don't know if you know, but faculty at BC are very busy. So somebody saying they're too busy is really a legitimate reason. He said he would only be able to participate if he received his previously requested reduction to teaching load. Despite receiving that reduction to his teaching load, he withdrew and instead hired a speaker for the exact same night he suggested for the debate to speak about white supremacy and the California Republican Party. It is within this politically rife context that Dr. Garrett explores the tale of two protests, free speech and the intellectual origins of BC campus censorship. Dr. Garrett?
Thank you, Professor Miller. Thank you to Professor Williams for allowing us this venue and for everyone who's made time tonight. I really appreciate it. I want to begin with a slogan protest, but not the slogan protest that you might be thinking of. I want to take us back, I am a historian, so I want to take us back to the great slogan protest of 2011 and 12. Do you remember that one? No one does. Let me tell you why. So in 2011, on Columbus Day, 2 students, the president of MECHA and the soon-to-be president of the Native American Club, took to the campus with chalk in hand, and they wrote provocative slogans. Slogans like, Columbus is a murderer, Columbus Day is evil, no holidays for genocidal maniacs, those sorts of things. Now, those are not the actual photos because I don't have those photos, but it's that element. They put them on campus. They did it secretly. They actually wore bandanas on their face, and they moved across campus doing this. Now, they got away with it, it seemed, but the next day, the dean of student life called one of them in, the president of MECHA, and she scolded him. She said, "That is not acceptable on this campus. That is vandalism. And if you do it again, there's going to be some consequences." Firm scold. So a year passed. 1 year later, the Native American Club was thinking, Columbus Day is coming, what should we do? And someone suggested maybe we should write chalk messages. The then president of the club said, well, we tried that last year, and we got away with it, but there was a particular threat that it would be charged with vandalism, and I don't want to be charged with vandalism. So we had a talk. They came to a faculty advocate, me, I was the advisor of the club. I told him that I did not think that was vandalism, because vandalism requires malice and damage. And chalk can be sprayed off with water, it's not damage. They said, well, they said they're going to prosecute us. So I took it up with the administration. I went back and forth arguing that it was their right to free speech. She disagreed. She said it was vandalism. After we could not come to an agreement, I went over her head and I went to then college president Gomez. And I argued for her that this is free speech and to suppress it is a violation of their First Amendment right. President Gomez disagreed. She had some reasons, but she said we could discuss it more if we wanted, but I could tell she sort of had made her mind, and I had only been here 2 years, and I was not going to fight with the college president on my second year at Bakersfield College. So I went back to the club. I said, I'm sorry, students. I think that you are in the right. I think they're in the wrong, but I cannot promise you any protection of any sort. The students decided to do it anyway. So they one of them went out the morning of Columbus Day, a young Lakota man, also on our track team, very hard to catch. With chalk in hand, he wrote anti-Columbus Day slogans. Campus safety spotted him. They pursued him. He outran them. He found another location, began writing again. They found him again. He outran them again. After repeated markings on campus, he escaped incognito, unrecognized. Then the next day came. Do you know what happened? Absolutely nothing. Nobody called me and said, hey, Professor Garrett, we know you are arguing about the right of students to ride in chalk on Columbus Day. Can you tell us who did it? No one called in the students who had participated last year, one of which was the new participant. No one pursued it at all. They just let it go. Now fast forward a few years to 2019. In 2019, we had someone, presumably a student, maybe just a community member, someone applied half a dozen stickers to campus. 2 of those stickers were in EOP&S, the office which controls and manages a variety of social services for our students. Many of those students, well, for example, the Next Up program. The Next Up program provides care and additional assistance for former foster students. The EOP&S program provides a variety of services for students who are disadvantaged. Book vouchers worth hundreds of dollars. In fact, just last summer, I believe they gave a $475 check to everyone in EOP&S. Now, I'm not arguing that that's a bad idea. No. But I am arguing that it's something worth debate. That someone might be upset about that. That someone might say, hey, that's not fair. I didn't get $475. And so we see some stickers that went up. 2 of them in EOP&S. One of them was on outside on a lamppost. One was on a window. One was on an elevator metal panel. And I don't know if there were any others. They were all over, up in the PAC Performing Arts area. Now, the Performing Arts area had recently hosted a couple of Chicano activities, so it could very well be centered on that. Or it could be about the social services run out of that area. Or it could be something else. The stickers themselves, well, those in EOP&S said smash cultural Marxism. Additional stickers on campus, porn is social rot, never apologize for being white, feminism is cancer, diversity means no white people. In response to these slogans, the campus acted quite differently. The first offense in 2011-12, you recall, was simply a private warning and then no follow-up. But in 2019, we had a very public threat, not a warning, but a threat that if we find you, we will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. There were several campus meetings. There was a hate crime designation. The campus legally, officially tried to list it as a hate crime. Now, you all may have, if you were here last year, you may have got an email that said that there had been some vandalism. And it had some comments about inclusivity and diversity, which seemed odd, strange to put those together, but it might hint that maybe the vandalism had something to do with not wanting to be very diverse. Maybe that the vandalism had to do with racism, which is an assumption that may or may not be true. But the campus decided it would be a hate crime. And in that email, it said Clery Act notification in the title. That's your indicator. The Clery Act is federal law, which requires the campus tell you if there's an ongoing crime that is a threat to students and faculty and staff. So things like a purse snatcher that's repeatedly taking purses, or someone assaulting people on campus, something even a worse type of assault. Hate crimes fall into that category. Regular old vandalism, drawing horrible figures on the pool floor like we had, that does not get a Clery Act notification. But because they determined it was a hate crime, it required a Clery Act notification. So it was determined to be a hate crime. And Dr. Nikki Damania, who I love and adore and think the world of, clarified, just to be sure, that it was indeed identified as a hate crime. That was the campus policy. I'd also like to point out that the district overturned that policy several months later when all of the hubbub died down. District council said this is not a hate crime. No evidence that this was a hate crime. Not enough evidence. So we had the hate crime designation, and then we had counter messaging that was launched. We had media outlets were reached out to. Now this was not so much our administration as faculty from the Social Justice Institute and their associated pals. They reached out to the media to make sure that there was a narrative being spun that everyone knew there were racists attacking students at Bakersfield College, rather than discuss what the stickers actually said. Right? Crush social Marxism, let's consider social programs. Are these fair? Are these appropriate? No, silence those questions with accusations of racism. And those same faculty pushed administration to post signs on campus, which again, diversity is one of our virtues. Sure, yes it is. But no one ever questioned that. If the person who put those stickers up is a racist, then yes, they're challenging diversity. But if they're just questioning why some students get extra services and money, why they get the last registration, other students get pushed in front of them, well then that's not the issue at all. It has nothing to do with diversity. We're not really sure what their goals were. But the stickers went up nonetheless to tell people that inappropriate comments will not be tolerated, and if you hear them, you should report them to public safety. Suppression of First Amendment. I complained. They took the stickers down immediately. So, why? Well, before we get to why, let me ask, did we see a different treatment? I think you might say yes, it was different, but there's a good reason. Maybe there was a good reason, maybe there's not. I don't want to cross that bridge just yet. First, can we all agree that there was a different response? The institution certainly responded different. So then the question is why, right? Why? And I have what I think is the reason why. My argument for this evening, my thesis, if you will, is that there were three factors that played a role in this different treatment. The most important was the intellectual biases. Certain folks with certain political and social and intellectual views interpreted things in certain ways. And then that allowed them to fall into logical fallacies and emotional reasoning to justify what they already believed to be true, regardless of the facts. We're going to start, and that led to imagined motivations, imagined targets, and imagined violence even on this campus that may have never really been a threat. So let's start with logical fallacies, because logical fallacies are fun. Right? Now, some people may not know what that term means, so I want to explain. I know a lot of you are like, oh, I know this. I've had my critical thinking class. But others maybe not. So logical fallacies are just errors in logic, errors in reasoning. It's kind of like you have a math formula, and you take the data, the numbers, the 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and you plug them into the quadratic equation, and you get an answer that you think is reliable, right? Well, the logic is the formula. And if you plug things in the wrong place, or you remember the formula wrong, you end up with the wrong answer. Well, with logic, it's a little more slimy than that. Sometimes you might just get lucky. You might even get the right answer for the wrong reasons. But generally speaking, if you use bad logic, you're likely to have a bad answer. And I'm going to discuss a few of the logical fallacies that we saw on this campus. One category is red herrings. Red herrings are fallacies where you get folks to focus on the wrong thing, such as irrelevant facts that don't matter. So, well, that thing is, and it might be a true fact, but it really isn't relevant. Or straw man. You set up an argument that's similar to the argument you don't like, and you beat the snot out of it. You're like, I beat your argument. No, you didn't. You sidestepped it, and you talked about something else, and it looks like you got a good win, but you didn't actually address the issue. Or ad hominem, where you attack the person. This is popular in politics, right? Whether you think that Donald Trump or if you think that Bill Clinton was a horrible, morally bad person, that may or may not mean that their presidential policies aren't good, right? Maybe they're horrible people. I think they both are. But that doesn't mean that their policies are bad. That's a whole separate issue to debate, right? Ad hominem. And poisoning the well, that's one we'll definitely see. That's where you give them some information that may or may not be true, but you know full well that it's going to contaminate everything. And you're trying to make them view the rest of the data with a skewed sense that doesn't really reflect maybe an inclusive and honest representation of what's going on. Another category are the appeals. Right, appeals to popularity, everyone's doing it, right? You know that the Bible's true because it's the best-selling book in the history of the world. No, that doesn't mean it's true. It may be true, it may not be true, but just because lots of people like it doesn't make it true. Or appeals to emotion. Appeals to emotion, you should be afraid, it's scary. Appeals to disgust, appeals to pity, oh, don't do it to me. Ways to manipulate people. You'll see this one next Thursday, the speaker that's coming out. If you read the article that has the exact same title as his lecture, it is a series of appeals to emotion. It is about 7 or 8 different examples where BPD did bad things. And they're bad. They're bad things. Does that necessarily mean that all BPD are bad? That this is a normal behavior? No, it's cherry-picked data, right? Which gets us to our other category, hasty generalizations. You jump into assuming something is worse than it is with just a few examples. BPD might be bad. But you can't know that from 7 examples that may or may not be representative. You need a little bit more inclusive data, don't you? So hasty generalizations, guilt by association is one of those. You say, well, this person is kind of hangs out with those people. They're adjacent, so they must be bad. Cherry picking data, picking the ones that you know are going to get the response you want but aren't reflective. Genetic fallacy, you say, it came from that, so it must be bad because that's bad, so anything that comes from that is always bad. And composition division, where you say, this is the group, we know they're bad, so every piece must be bad. Or, here's the pieces that are bad, so the group is definitely bad. These are all bad logic. Now, sometimes there's an echo, a little hint of truth in there, so it's not that they're totally unreliable, but you shouldn't hang your entire case on things like this. Another thing, cataloging. This one comes from one of my favorites. John Stuart Mill wrote sort of the textbook original thing on what are fallacies, and he said sometimes people will rack up lots of these things together.
Excuse me, could you talk to this part of the room also?
Yes.
When your back is to us, we really don't hear you. So all we can do is cherry pick what you're saying.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would appreciate
Okay.
that. I don't
Thank
think
you.
we-
So cataloging is where you grab a whole lot of logical fallacies and you toss them all together and you say, see all the evidence? Well, yeah, it's all bogus evidence, right? It doesn't matter that you have lots of bad evidence, it's still bad logic, right? So now let's try to apply these very issues to what happened on campus. Do you find, and my challenge to you is to spend the next 15 minutes as we go through what happened and see how many logical fallacies you can spot, because they're all over the place. First of all, we get public safety gets a call on April 27th from someone in the UPNS office that there has been some vandalism. They come out, they take a report. The report says that the staff member believes that the sticker is hate speech. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But that's what the person who filed the report thought. Okay, now public safety is going to do their thing. I don't pretend to know all of public safety's procedures, but I would imagine they've made the report. Someone said it's hate speech. It's probably going to raise some alarm, and it's going to work its way up to chief counts or wherever else it goes. 5 hours later, a local activist who also teaches a couple classes for us, and for the last year or two has been the Mecha advisor, Octavio Barajas, sent out an email to 11 recipients titled, Hate Vandalism on the Panorama Campus, entrenching that notion that it must be hate, right? And you gotta wonder why. I mean, who are these 11 people? Why would he need to send this email out? I mean, public safety already knows about it. Who are the 11 people? Well, it was a few administrators all the way to the top, vice president, and it was also a handful of completely unrelated Social Justice Institute folks. Why are they being involved? Well, because there's a wrong that must be corrected, right? That's what social justice is about. He argues 2 reasons why this is hate speech. First one is his proximity argument. He says it was near people of color. One of them is even on the face of a person of color. Therefore, it is racist. The other is near a person of color. Welcome to Bakersfield College. It's full of people of color. You can't do anything not near a person of color. Find me another place that this person, this vandal, could have put up a sticker that wouldn't be near a person of color. I'm not saying it's okay to stick the stickers up, but the argument that because there's a person of color nearby is a pretty weak argument. The second argument, better. Second argument, he says, it is affiliated with 100-handers. You see, if you look closely, on the side there, it says 100-handers. And on the bottom, it has a link, a web address to their Twitter feed. So if you want to know if it's hate speech, if it's a hate group, maybe the best place to look would be at their Twitter feed. Let's look at what they've got going on. Maybe they are a hate group. So do they generate racially defensive stickers? I've made some categories here. Defensive, as in nativist, maybe even xenophobic. afraid. You know, stickers like Black Lives Matter. Like, hey, our group is being picked on, stop it. Do they make those kind of stickers? Absolutely, they make those stickers. I looked to count up how many I could see. There were about 57 stickers up until the time of this event. Of those 57, 37 of them struck me as that sort of, hey, don't pick on white people kind of stickers. Now, is that racist? It's definitely racially defensive. They also make some that are racially aggressive. Like, we don't like those people of color. How about those stickers? Now, that would say something, right? How many of those do we see? There are 4 out of the 57, I count. And of those 4, one of them stands out as particularly heinous, right? You see the one that's just really is the ugly one? The real ugly one? I mean, all 4 of those are pretty ugly, but one of them is particularly, right? Make America White Again. That's pretty ugly, right? Notice how fuzzy that is? That's because that one's tucked away and really hard to find. I didn't even see it the first few times I looked at their webpage. It's not easy to find. But once I knew it was there, I was told it was there, I started looking closer and I did find it and blew it up for you. So it is there. So there are a few racially offensive stickers that are aggressive racial stickers. Do hunter hunters generate non-race related stickers? What do you think? Well, you can do the numbers. Love your nation, stand your ground, Antifa is domestic terrorists. What about those stickers? There's a few of those too, over a dozen. There's more of those than there are of the aggressive, really racial ones, but there's still, there's lots of stickers there. Are those racist by association? Are those slogans racist? Love your nation? Now, obviously, it's made by a group which does have 4 really ugly racial stickers. What do you think? Andrew Bond, he thinks, he wrote in the Californian, the group produces content that is explicitly white supremacist, anti-immigrant, and inflammatory. Do you agree? I think they do. It looked like it to me. I mean, make America white again, that looks pretty inflammatory. For example, one can download and print hunter hunters stickers saying, make America white again. Intolerance is a virtue and Western civilization is white civilization. Those are pretty ugly, right? Did he cherry pick? Pick the 2 of the worst and misrepresented one of them. 2 of the worst for the worst one, right? And then does the order matter? I mean, which one did he begin with? Is he poisoning the well? He gave you the most egregious, horrible one that was hard to find first. And from that perspective, you're right, everything else looks pretty bad. Even the racially defensive ones, like don't pick on us, start to look pretty ugly from that perspective. But what if we play the game the other way? What if we start with the least ugly ones? What if you forget every sticker you saw and we start fresh? Imagine for a moment that it begins with love your country. Communism killed 100 million. Antifa are domestic terrorists. Intolerance is a virtue. Intolerance stands against mediocrity, complacency, and weakness, the actual text that got truncated. Stand your ground and make art beautiful again. Now, if we start there, and then we introduce the stickers that appeared on campus. Smash cultural Marxism. Feminism is cancer. Porn is a social rot. That's definitely conservative. But is it racist from this perspective? It's all about how you introduce the topic, right? You can make it look like something it's not, maybe. Is this a fair and honest representation? No, I'm cherry picking now too, right? I'm playing the same game, but it changes the way things look. So are all of the hunter hunters stickers racist by association? I mean, there are 4 really ugly ones and a couple dozen, 3 dozen that are racially defensive. Can we assume that the perpetrator is thus racist by association? Is it possible the perpetrator really just doesn't like the things they posted, like pornography and social Marxism, and they don't like feminism? Is that possible? Or can we conclude definitively, no, they're racist? They were racist because... What if we applied this fallacy to another group on campus? What if we look at Mecha? Mecha's documents are the most racist and disgusting documents on this campus. They talk about expelling the capachos and the gringos and making a race-based nation of brown people. What the hell is that? That is racist. That's like make America white again. But our Mecha students aren't racist, right? I mean, I know lots of them. I like them. I think they're great students. I know full well, Erin Miller knows full well. She was tongue-in-cheek asking, can we apply the same standard both ways? Because it's not fair to project, oh, my group I like, we're gonna look past the ugly documents and know that that's not what it means. They don't really mean that. I know a lot of our students, they don't mean that. Our Metro students are not ugly racists.
That's from 1969, I just want to correct you.
And it is still used today. It is the,
No,
well,
it's
the
not.
like last couple months it got changed.
Just 30 minutes for questions at this point.
Last couple months it got changed. It's been their rules for decades. Been in the bylaws. Should we allow origin to overshadow content? What content appeared at BC? Those are our content, and that's where our focus should be. Yeah, we can look at context. Maybe context does matter. It does matter, right? But it shouldn't be the driving definition of what's going on. The actual content should be our focus. What do these messages suggest about our vandal? If these are the pictures, the slogans he chose or she chose to post, if you're only looking at context, how would you characterize this person? Definitely seems conservative. Are they racist? By those content. Can we have a discussion about that? Can we openly discuss it and without assuming that anyone who doesn't agree is a racist? Can we have an open discussion? Or if by asking that question, does that make me a racist? Because I said, what about the content? So there were a lot of logical fallacies. If you saw them, there were red herrings. There were arguments ad populum, getting 11 people on board, hasty generalizations, poisoning the well, fallacy of division, lots of it playing there. Let's look at emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning. I'm going to draw from a new book came out last year by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. Greg Lukianoff is the president of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. It's a free speech organization for college campuses. Jonathan Haidt is an NYU professor of psychology, lifelong liberal, progressive Democrat, so it's not a conservative hack job of any sort. And they came together noticing that there were some problems on campuses. They observed that instead of teaching students to be strong and to overcome and to engage, the campuses were putting up walls. They talked about cognitive behavioral disorders and cognitive behavioral therapy. If anyone is in psychology majors, the basic foundation of therapy today is this. And it is basically, as one of the faculty in psychology told me this week, he said it's basically bravery training. You encourage them to go out and tackle the most difficult thing they can tackle. If they've been traumatized by water, then you say, well, start here, let's go get your feet in the kiddie pool and see how it goes and come back and talk to me. And then go sit in the shallow end and see how it goes and come back to you. And then get in the deep end and then go to the ocean. You encourage them to challenge themselves. That's what therapy's about, but not what we're seeing at universities and colleges. No. In this text, they talk about how there's a whole lot of cognitive disorders that are happening. The opposite is happening. Emotional reasoning, mental filtering where you only look at the negative, magnification of things to make them seem worse than they are, fortune telling, anticipating the worst possible scenario, catastrophizing, all of this designed to save and protect students. And it's with good intent. We don't want our students to be in bad situations. We want to help them. But the ultimate consequence is we strip them of the opportunity to develop immunities, which ultimately makes them more fragile, more vulnerable when they leave. It's actually doing more harm than good, they argue. Again, this is a clinical psychologist at NYU, lifelong Democrat progressive, not a conservative. And there's others who have made similar arguments. It's a common idea in psychology. So getting back to our narrative of what actually happened, Octavio Barajas' email to 11 folks says, the placement of this sticker is alarming. Alarming, that's a minor scary word, but it's small, it's not too bad. White supremacist organization has been recruiting and whose presence is now felt on our campus. That seems to me, I can imagine, like the skinheads out there with tables and saying, sign up, right? That's not, this is a bit of a catastrophizing, right? The forceful tone of the verb smash. The word incites hostility. When something is smashed, it involves physically breaking something into pieces. We've got violence now. Andrew Bond's piece in the Californian likewise talks about the conspicuous call to violently smash. That is called concept creep. It's when you increasingly shift the definition in a way that gets you what you want, even though it's not what it really means. It's disingenuous and intellectually not acceptable. And then he ends his email with, I compel you to address this issue directly and publicly. That's one of the reasons we get a different response. He's demanding action. So the campus holds its hate vandalism meetings. And the admin sticks up its stickers. Oh, I'm sorry, the admin then makes a connection to the UNC shooting. If you recall, there was a shooting at UNC on April 30th, horrible. And the administration makes the connection that the sticker slapper might be a shooter. In an email to our campus safety listserv, Nikki Demania sends, I was sent this by President Christian regarding the shooting that happened on Tuesday in Charlotte. This fly won't go away. And the incidents happening here at our campus with the stickers. I can't express enough how important it is that we all work together to ensure our community is safe and we make our presence known. There is an absolute, undeniable connection now to a mass shooter. Our sticker person might be a mass shooter. Catastrophizing? I mean, maybe it's a racist. That's possible. I'm open to that. Maybe it's a, but a mass shooter? And then, of course, we jump into active shooter response training all across campus. It's all the trend. Now, this is hearsay. I don't actually know, but I'm told that the person teaching these classes has been making the connection to the sticker slapper as well. That this might be a beginning of it. So, okay, this is a lot of catastrophizing, emotional reasoning going on. And then the third foundational, really, thing that's driving this different response is intellectual biases. And what intellectual biases are we talking about? The bias is a social justice bias. So I wrote a piece in the Bakersfield, California, to say, hold on, maybe it's not racism. Maybe they're actually upset about the social justice, about the progressive politics. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but maybe that's the issue and it's not about race at all. I talk about what is cultural Marxism, for those who don't know. I wrote, the term refers to the habitual application of the Marxist victim-oppressor binary and the consequent redistribution of power to remedy perceived injustice. I really like that definition. I'm kind of proud of it. I was like, that was pretty good. I like that one. Then the second sentence. It is the intellectual centerpiece of our social justice efforts and the driving force of equity programs throughout California and at Bakersfield. That was the shot across the bow, wasn't it? Now I was sending a message, right? I was saying, hey, I see what's going on here. We have social justice warriors getting involved, and they don't want to talk about what's actually the stickers say. They want to accuse it of racism. So what was the response? Well, Andrew Bond, one of our Social Justice Institute fellows, he works in the Social Justice Institute, gets paid by it. He wrote another piece. He said, culture Marxism circulates in right-wing discourse as a catch-all phrase for policies and initiatives that promote multiculturalism, diversity, equity, but we shouldn't conflate diversity initiatives with social justice and social justice with Marxism. What do you think of that one? Do you see a logical fallacy? Now, I should be fair and admit we all make logical fallacies even when we're not trying to. I'll probably make one or two tonight that you'd be like, gotcha, Professor Garrett. So I don't mean to say, gotcha, you're cheating. We all do it. We all do it. But we shouldn't frame policy based on it once we figure it out, right? So he's saying because some racist people use that term, and they do, then that term is void. I don't agree with that. Because while, yes, some racist people do use that term, so do award-winning scholars. So, but maybe he doesn't know that. I don't know. Maybe you don't know what cultural Marxism is. So I wanted to spend a little time tonight to trace the origins of cultural Marxism to make it plainly clear for everyone what it is and what kind of award-winning scholars are actually talking about this. First, the terms. Racism, social Marxism, we should talk about terms first, right? A sociologist, North Carolina State, I believe, published with Oxford, he writes, trying to discredit an analysis simply by giving it an unpopular label is not intellectually responsible. All analyses are open to challenge, of course, but an intelligent challenge worthy of equal consideration must be in the form of a counterargument. So, it is lazy, intellectually lazy to say racist or to say cultural Marxist and not really get into what that means. That's not fair, right? Because you know full well conservatives are like, yeah, Marx is bad. And liberals will be like, yeah, race is bad. And you're rallying the troops. So let's do an honest and fair dive into what it actually means. What are the origins of cultural Marxism? It goes back to Hegel. Hegel, German philosopher. He believed that people in society were in this state of alienation, a state of conflict, that there's society's bumping along, and then someone comes along with a new idea and says, hey, we should do this. And society says, no. And yes, we should. And there's a conflict. That conflict results in a new product, a new synthesis, which becomes the new status quo. It's better, isn't it? We've taken the best of this, the best of that, and now we have the new. And that becomes the new status quo. And we move along until a new idea comes along, and they clash, and we get a new thing again. And it happens over and over again, leading us towards a better and better world. Greater awareness, greater knowledge, greater freedom. Not freedom to go to the store and buy whatever coat you want, but freedom of the mind, to understand who you really are. He was very metaphysical. Now, his ideology becomes the foundation of a lot of German philosophy. And another person who comes after him, Marx, you know, Marx adopts those ideas. Marx says, yes, there is conflict, it happens, and we move along the line to something better. But I don't like the metaphysical stuff. Marx says, no, it's grounded in historical materialism, economic relationships. That we have a system like feudalism, and people outgrow it, and there's conflict, and plah, we get capitalism. And then we have people outgrow it, and plah, we have communism. So why waste our time fiddling around down here? We all know communism is the end goal. Let's just get there. Let's help people get there. That's the foundation of Marxism, one of the foundations. Problem with it is, decade after decade after decade, the inevitable conclusion of a communist revolution never really happens. None of the advanced capitalist countries turn into communist countries. There's a couple of agrarian ones that are like, screw it, just jump to the end, and they try. But none of it doesn't happen the way that Marx predicts, that economics, the capitalists would outgrow it and convert into this. It just doesn't happen. And by the 1920s, a lot of German philosophers were scratching their head going, what happened? I thought this is supposed to be the way it works, right? They're confused, and they start looking for answers. One in particular, a guy named Felix Weil. Felix Weil is a very rich kid. His daddy was rich. He goes to school, gets a PhD in historical political philosophy, I think it was. He writes a dissertation about how to make the socialist revolutions happen, because they're overdue and they should be happening. He hosts a Marx Week, one of the German towns, brings in a bunch of scholars. He founds an entire think tank designed to prove that Marxism is still true. We just have to figure out why it's not working, right? And that is what we call the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School are a bunch of German scholars who are dedicated to Marxism, and they want to show that indeed it's going to happen, but why isn't their answer for why it's not going to happen? Why we didn't have the revolution? Their answer is people are duped. You're all too busy playing on your electronics. Well, they didn't have that back then, but you're watching movies. You're distracted by politics and media. You are a bunch of lemmings that don't know what's good for you. That's why we haven't had the revolution. And so their duty, their responsibility as good, intelligent, informed people who have seen the light is to make sure that, is to rip down all of those institutions so that we can see through that garbage and eventually have our Marxist revolution. That's the Frankfurt School. Their theory is called critical theory. Critical theory. You need to be critical in every way of those institutions and show the holes in them so people can see the truth. They're also drawing, not just from Marx, but a variety of other scholars, right? Because you can see there's sort of a subconscious, like, epistemology, sort of you don't know what you don't know kind of argument in there. So they're drawing from others. One of my favorites that seems to be prevalent is Plato. If you've had your philosophy classes, you all know about Plato's cave, right? Plato's cave. Plato says, look, we're all a bunch of people stuck in a cave. And all we can see are the shadows on the wall. We're chained down, we can't see anything else, we can't see each other. And that's our reality, it's always been our reality, we know nothing else. And then, one day, someone gets free. They escape, they look back, they see the puppets that are casting shadows. This is the reality, this is the truth. Now I know, I was fooled all this time. Then, they continue climbing out of the cave. Eventually, they see the real truth. And now they are enlightened. That's a wonderful story. I mean, I like that story. I think there's a lot of value in that metaphor, right? We're all on our own little journey to greater enlightenment. I think there's a lot of truth in that. But the problem is that there's some folks who think they're the ones who are the only ones who climbed out and everyone else just shut up and do what they say. So the Frankfurt School wants us to follow those, that's their foundation. And those guys are called cultural Marxists, not just by me or the right-wing blogs, but by award-winning scholars. There's scholarship on this. Alan Bloom's a University of Chicago philosopher. Martin Jay's an endowed chair at Cal Berkeley. There's several other books that use the term very explicitly on the cover by big-name presses, Duke University. It is a well-known term in academia. And it is used by right-wing weirdos, too. It's true, it is. Because they're excited that they found something. They're like, oh, yeah, that can prove they're excited about that. Does that make it false? No. It does mean there's some crackpots using it, but it doesn't mean that everybody uses it as a crackpot. It inspires other intellectual movements, like the decolonization movement. Decolonization theory says, look, white folks have colonized Africa, Asia, Latin America. Indigenous people everywhere have been oppressed, and they don't even know the ways they've been oppressed. It's in their like psyche, it's deep in their minds, and you have to save them. You have to rip that Western culture out of them. You have to empower them to be their true indigenous self. Fine, but you can see the connection, right? That it's, you don't know what you don't know. We have to help you get to that destination that we see. It's inspired by that. Also inspires the postmodernist movement. Right? Everything is a construct, the postmodernists say. It's all made up. It's all fake. It's all bogus, and we have to rip it all down. There is no truth, postmodernists would say. It's Frankfurt School, right? Problem with it is it can't withstand its own criticism. You say, well, okay, so then you're not true either. And then we also have critical race and critical gender theory, which not so creatively use the same exact term of critical theory. They just slide in race or gender. And that argues very similarly that you don't know it, but everywhere you look, everyone's racist, or there's racism everywhere. The institutions are racist, the system is racist, and if it doesn't work out the way you think it should, it's probably because someone was racist or sexist, depending if you're using critical race or critical gender theory. Now, you know, these things have all added wonderful things to our field. I do not mean to defame them and say they're garbage. They are not. They've added, we see the perspectives of people we're overlooking, right? We've seen some of the problems in some of our institutions. And you know what? Sometimes people are racist. But the problem is they've become the lens through which everything must be viewed. You know what? Sometimes people aren't racist. Sometimes it's just because, you know, something else. It's not always racism. And that's the foundation for the social justice movement, not just here, but everywhere. It's founded on this ideology. It is the intellectual inheritor of cultural Marxism. And if you don't like my flowchart, one other thing. Here's another awesome philosopher, Karl Popper, back in '45. He wrote about how all of these sort of elitist interpretations of society, you have to do what we say because we're the ones who see outside the cave, that all of these are dangerous because they require us to all gullibly believe that those guys are the ones who know best and we should all just shut up and do as they say. He said that these types of approaches lead invariably to the attempt to impose our scale of higher values upon others in order to make them realize what seems to us of greatest importance for their happiness in order, as it were, to save their souls. I mean, I feel good about making you do what I think is right because I know it's right. I tell my kids that all the time. Like, it's just right. Just do what I say. I know I'm right. But it's not very democratic or inclusive. And then we've got this character. Marcuse, he was one of those Frankfurt School guys. He comes over to the States, teaches at a bunch of universities, publishes several very widely sold books, often called the founder of the New Left. And he's kind of a pretty extreme guy. One of his famous arguments was liberating tolerance. And just again to show it's not crackpot right-wing blogs that are saying this, this is encyclopedia.com, which talks about his approach. He believed that liberating tolerance involves the withdrawal of toleration of speech and assembly from groups and movements on the right and aggressively partisan promotion of speech and groups and progressive movements on the left. It's okay to silence the people on the right because they're stupid and wrong. Just do what I say, it's right. He taught this. Scholars wrote about this. Some of them adopt this. Now, I don't mean that everyone did, but some did. He's a huge actor in the field. And so we have some of our intellectual biases. Now I want to look at 4 examples of it happening, of repressive tolerance here at BC in our recent sticker issue. To show you that, yes, indeed, that ideology is here and played out. Example number 1. Andrew Bond's Californian article said, a more productive query would be to ask whether or not we should consider viewpoints based in hate, racism, xenophobia, viable and debate-worthy in an academic setting. To do so would be to concede that such views are on par with fact-based reasoned perspectives, granting them a legitimacy they don't deserve. We don't need to talk about those views because they're racist. Well, yes, if you call what you don't like racist and then you use racism as a label you don't have to discuss, perfect, you can eliminate anybody questioning your ideas. You just have to call them racist first. And if you're coming from a critical race theory and you think everything's racist you don't like, well, it's very easy to eliminate the other side. Second example, diversity, the sticker that went up, diversity at Bakersfield College. Inappropriate comments will not be tolerated. Call public safety. If anyone says, I don't like social Marxism, you should report them. Because I don't like social Marxism is now racist. Is that what they meant? Maybe not, maybe so. You're suppressing that discussion. By demanding the interpretation of crushed social Marxism must be racist and therefore must be suppressed. Third example. In the email exchanges that follow from Octavio's email, Andrew Bond insists to the administration that we need to implement mandatory training for all faculty and staff. We'll make sure they all understand the right way, right? The good, progressive social justice way. Because we're out of the cave and they're not, so we're going to tell them how to think. And they're all going to have to attend because it's going to be mandatory. And the fourth example, this one is a bit complicated, so go with me for it. But it's pretty interesting. Somebody leaked to Eyewitness News very early on, April 29th, 30th or so, that there were racist stickers on campus, hoping that the news would do a piece on it, right? Don't know who that person was. Somebody did. Then, Octavio Barajas and Oliver Rosales wrote, they were the prime resources for the Renegade Rip article, which again they tried to make the focus white supremacists on campus. Then Oliver Rosales reached out to Current Soul News and asked them to try to get them to make an article about white racists on campus. It's like someone's trying to make the media tell a certain narrative, isn't it? At this point, Matt Garrett, myself, decided maybe I should say, let's hold on, maybe it's not racism, maybe it's actually a talk about social Marxism. I wrote, I'm neither endorsing the sticker's campaign methods or its message, but I'm asking that we take them seriously. Does our community college devote disproportionate attention and resources to certain groups? Does that marginalize some? Is that appropriate? Is it reasonable for a student to be upset that they didn't get the $475 check? Can we have that discussion without being called racist? Well, the answer is no. Andrew Bond writes a piece, he says, we're not going to engage that, that's racist talk, right? He said, he didn't call me a racist, to be clear, he did not call me a racist. He said that issue is racist and we don't want to entertain it, okay? Then Christine Cruz Boone wrote a letter to the editor, similar argument. She said, I fear that Professor Garrett has amplified the voice of the white supremacists. I don't know her. I don't know. Then here's the really interesting one. Paige Atkinson, former BC student I've never met, writes an article for the Current Soul News where she calls me, personally, an apologist for white supremacy. And then she republishes it in the Bakersfield Californian, which is a no-no, by the way. You're not supposed to republish things like that usually, but either her or the Californian, somebody decided to go ahead and do it without the other knowing. Calling me an apologist. And you might say, did she really say that, Professor Garrett? Yes, she did, because someone challenged her on Facebook, and she replied back, I didn't call Dr. Garrett a white supremacist. I called him an apologist. Remember, the internet is forever. Where'd I go? Then Aaron. Aaron Miller, at this point, says, okay, hold on. Pots and kettles, guys. Like, you got to hold the same standard, whether it's a white group that's got some questionable documents or a mention that's got some questionable. Let's have the same standard. And then Miguel Nidver, I don't know who he is. He's a local community member, former school teacher, never heard of him before. But he writes an article saying, this sounds a lot like Black Lives Matter stickers. I don't know why we're calling this racist. I mean, they're obviously feeling threatened, whoever these white kids are, or whoever they are, but he's, okay. And then we get a couple months later an anonymous article in the Current Soul News from, claims to be from Metcha, but it's anonymous. Now, at this point, you might say, well, Professor Garrett, you wanted open debate. You got it, right? We haven't opened it, sort of. I mean, I'm saying let's discuss it. They're saying don't discuss it. But there is some community. It looks like an organic discussion, right? Until you follow the money. So, Current Soul News, right? Where's it at? This story was made possible with a grant from California Humanities in partnership with Bakersfield College. That's the byline. I thought, who at Bakersfield College is my institution calling me a white supremacist apologist? Which we all know is pretty similar to saying you're a white supremacist. My institution called me that? So I asked, what's going on? I asked our director of PR, has our brand been hijacked, or did our college call me a white supremacist apologist? So she investigated, and they changed the byline to read, it was made by the California Humanities in partnership with Bakersfield College Foundation with the Virginia Alfred Harrell Foundation. That's who paid for it. Now that doesn't appear on any of their other articles. They never say who paid for it. Why do you think they included who paid for it this time? Was there an attempt to maybe make it look like an institutional, everybody thinks he's a white supremacist, I don't know. So then the problem they made though is they listed the grant, and I looked it up. If you look up that grant, yes indeed, Alfred and Virginia Harrell gave $20,000 to Bakersfield College Foundation. That money is managed by an account manager. That account manager gives it to Current Soul News, who publishes whatever they want or whatever the account manager wants. They're on their payroll. They publish things like pro-social justice articles, pro-Octavio Barajas and Oliver Rosales articles, several puff pieces on them, how wonderful they are for the community. They write a bunch of left-wing stuff. I mean, it's pro-immigration. That's okay. I mean, we have MSNBC, we have Fox News. You can have political views in news. That happens, right? As long as it's your own money and not paid for and endorsed by the state, right? And they also wrote the defamation of both myself and then of Aaron Miller as well. The Metro piece said that she wants to talk with white supremacists and advocate those views. So, who's this account manager, right? It's account number 220-76800. Do you want to know, like, who's paying for hit pieces? All right. You have to find out yourself. Then look back at this page. You start to follow that money. This person's paying for these articles. Whoops, go back. Everyone in green is also getting paid by that same account manager. Oliver Rosales got paid $8,400 to do social justice last year, got paid $7,100 this year, also got reassigned time. I think he gets more reassigned time money, stipend, than anyone on campus pretty much, to do social justice activism. Barajas, he gets a few hundred. Andrew Bond gets $2,100. She got $300 to $600 allotted her from the board. Yeah. And she actually is on a foundation scholarship thing, a fellowship from Current Soul News, paid for by the grant that this person controls. They're all on payroll. Is that an organic discussion from the community? Now, I'm not saying that the account manager made them write these things. I don't think that at all. I think they all wrote that because they all feel that way because they're all in the same group. But it seems like there's a little, you make the decision, what do you think of that? So to recap, 4 examples of repressive tolerance, right? We have, we're not going to debate it, it's not worthy of debate. We have, no one's allowed to say these things or we'll report you to public safety. We have, hey, everyone needs to go to to mandatory training. And we have a news agency that's really on the payroll of someone here on campus. And also an attempt to clearly drive all the other news organizations in town. Suppression of any other views besides their own. Is that open and intellectual discussion, or is that Machiavellian backstage maneuvering? So, we've got intellectual biases, we've got emotional reasoning, and we've got logical fallacies. I think that's why they're treated differently. Solutions? Some solutions. What can we do about this? Well, first of all, we need to strip the proxies of their institutional authority. We do not need our own news media organization on the payroll that is secretly looking like it's not on payroll, but really is advocating for particular interests. That's inappropriate. We ought to have the BC Foundation and its board ought to audit that account and any other account run by that account manager. Some of the board members are here today. I hope they'll do that. And we ought to remove that account manager, freeze those funds until we figure out what else is going on back there. Partisan politics paid for by taxpayer dollars is not okay. Whatever side you're on, even if you think those stickers are racist, fine. But no one should have their own personal media control agency to push their agendas, paid for by your dollars. Update and defund, repudiate and defund Current Soul News. That needs to be clearly stated. We do not support them, we will no longer fund them, and they do not get to write whatever they want under our name and our tax dollars. They want to do their own political stuff, that's fine. They can do that privately. They don't need to be supported by the local taxpayers. A lot of their money is grant money, I should clarify, but it's not all, right? They're getting work out of people that are getting reassigned time here and whatever else. We also need to recommit to free speech. A couple of ideas here. The Chicago principles. Back in 2014, the University of Chicago faced its own free speech crisis. Their solution was to turn to their own scholars, and they have some doozies. It's the University of Chicago. World-class leading scholars on First Amendment. They produced a document called the Chicago Principles. The Chicago Principles outlines not only that we should have free speech, because we all agree to that in principle, but why we should have free speech. My favorite meatiest passage of it is, in a word, the university's fundamental commitment is to the principle that debate or deliberation may not be suppressed because the ideas put forth are thought by some, or even by most members of the university community, to be offensive, unwise, immoral, wrong-headed. It is for individual members of the university community, not for the university as an institution, to make those judgments for themselves. They're saying, even if it's racist, we don't suppress it. You let people figure out for themselves. You have the debate, have the discussion. You know, maybe whoever put those stickers up is a raving lunatic racist. I'm open to that. It's possible, right? But we don't know that. And they have other issues that they're raising. Why don't we discuss them? Second point, we need intellectual humility, where we can admit that, you know, maybe I'm wrong, because I'll tell you what, maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But we have to be open to that possibility. John Stuart Mill, he argues that, look, when we have a debate, you know, if you open up the discussion, maybe you're wrong and you learn something. Maybe you're right and you reaffirm that you're right and you learn more why you're right. But most likely is that you're kind of got right and some wrong, and they kind of got right and some wrong, and maybe at the end we all know a little bit more. So let's have that debate. Also, University of Chicago, their principles say, education should not be intended to make people comfortable. It's meant to make them think. Right? I know it might be uncomfortable. Like, what if they are a racist? It might be. But you know, let's have that discussion and let's figure out and learn something from it. Let's grow, let's get out there, let's break out of our little bubble and experience and learn and be better than we were. Also, Hayden Lukianoff talked about a heterodox academy. Make sure your academy, your institution, is diverse in views. I love Bakersfield College. One of the reasons is that we are diverse in views. We have people on the left, people on the right, people that aren't on the scale at all, people that are political, people that aren't political. We have great diversity here, and I appreciate that. Let's hold on to that, because that's disappearing at other institutions. Right? There are certain folks who think that they know best and they should silence everyone else. We ought not allow that here. The most important diversity is not gender or race. It is intellectual diversity. The only reason race and gender matter in our diversity searches is because we know full well that that reflects different experiences, different ideas, and different ideas. It's intellectual diversity that we're really after. Race helps us get there sometimes. We can think about that way. But it's the intellectual diversity that we first and foremost must preserve. All right, so quick little review. There are the solutions that we need to do. Strip the proxies of their authority and promote free speech. We have a campus. It's our campus. It's where our community lives. And we should have control over it. We should be able to discuss it. We should all have open debate and come to our own conclusions. But it should be done in public, not behind the scenes. We should have that discussion. Thank you for your time tonight.
Stephen Ledesma, did you make it in? No, he couldn't get in. He couldn't get in. Okay, Debbie, do you mind? So just a 30-second timer. Thank you, Dr. Garrett. I certainly feel like I learned something. Have some research to do about account number 22704, whatever it is. So questions or comments? Again, the rules are, we've asked you to write your question or comment on your card. That is not to collect and control, but simply for you to create a concise question or comment, so because of nerves you don't kind of rattle on forever and take up everybody's time. Once we call on you, you'll have 30 seconds. When the 30-second ends, I'll ask you to conclude, and Dr. Garrett will respond if it requires a response, or we'll move on to the next one. Did you have your hand up? Do you have a card? Can you be 30 seconds or less?
Yeah.
Awesome. Go.
What happens if we can't trust the other side to be as intellectual, like understanding as our own views inside the stickers themselves? Because there were a couple of stickers that were just as bad, but can we get them to see them as bad as we did, or as others did?
No, I totally can relate to that concern that the other side might not be entering into honest and open discussions.
They're race defending too.
Right. So what do? Do you clam up, or do you open it up and have that discussion? I agree, it's a difficult problem to solve. And I think the only answer, though, is that old adage that sunlight's the best disinfectant, right? We open it up, we expose what's going on, we say, look, they said this, they did this. Let's have a discussion about it. And, and if everyone looks at it and says, yeah, that's racist, then now you've gained more strength and you've got more people that are on the same page because we've been able to air that out. So I'm all for discussing it, even if you think that the other side won't enter in honest discussions, at least you're moving forward with some sort of openness and awareness and more people can be involved in the process. But yeah, I agree, it's difficult when the other side's not playing ball.
Yeah, that was the main concern too. And also, both sides might end up putting something onto the campus themselves too. So that's another concern where the campus may end up becoming some divulging of clashing ideals.
Yeah. And I'm not advocating that we all stick stickers all back and forth.
I don't want that either.
But we can discuss what happened.
Excellent, good. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you knew off the top of your head how BC defines hate crime?
How BC defines hate crime. I would assume that BC follows whatever the federal rules are. Federal rules for hate crime, I've read them. Nikki Damani would know off the top of his head, I bet, because he deals with it. The definition of a hate crime that we follow. It's like,
Off the top of my head.
it's a crime that has like intent of malice against one of like 6 different groups, like age, gender, sex, religion. It's an intent against one of, intent for violence or intent of crime against one of those groups, something like that.
I don't know the full definition off the top of my head.
There's like a paragraph definition, but they have it, I've seen it, they use it to make decisions.
And ideology is not one of those categorizations
it is not.
that designates to a hate crime. Others? Yes.
I actually looked up the definition of hate crime while you're kind of talking about it, just to kind of have a basis. As far as what I was able to find, it's defined as a crime motivated by prejudice on basis of race, religion, sexual orientation, or other grounds.
Sounds about right.
Or other grounds.
I've not heard the other grounds, but maybe it is there.
I looked up a couple, and some included that and some didn't.
Because my understanding is you could go to like the Democratic National Convention or Republican National Convention and commit a crime, and it would be a crime, but not a hate crime.
Yeah, I think it's mainly rooted in the motivation of something.
Yeah.
That I do remember reading that. Good. Other questions? Or comments? Comments as well?
Right.
Are welcome. Yes.
So if we are supposed to report our peers, if we hear something inappropriate, who will become the authority on what is inappropriate and what gives them the right to have that authority?
I share your concern. Yeah, that's the problem, right? In the actual policy here at BC, it would go to Director of Student Life, Nikki Damani, I think. Who would have if someone were to see something inappropriate and want to hear something inappropriate, they would report it to the campus, it would go to your office, and then he would call them in and investigate. He would talk to them, see what he thought. He'd probe them out and see if they seem crazy or if there's a misunderstanding. I think that's the policy they follow.
If you see something, you submit it in public safety.
Which is a lot of power in the hands of one person. Now, I absolutely trust Nikki Damani. I think he is the most wonderful, fair, and even person. But I don't know who's going to hold the job next.
What, like you just said, someone heard something out of context, too. I mean, if anyone can report something, you have subjectivity, you have, like, when you're just walking by, you hear some random thing, like, you're not even in a conversation, you could be, like, completely, like, saying the opposite. Someone hears something, like, it makes it something.
Yeah, there could be misunderstandings.
Good. Okay. Yes.
I'm just sharing a concern, faculty member. I teach chemistry. So one of my concerns is, when does if anybody can report anything that's offending, how long before this gets used as a tool against faculty members? Like, oh, I failed this class, and this is something I didn't like. So that's my concern. That's a concern for me every day in the classroom.
Yes, I can relate to that.
So,
Imagine being called a racist because you wanted to talk about something. Yeah, it's a problem, right? The call-out culture, right? That's something that actually Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt talk about in their book. They talk about the call-out culture, that we have a problem here where you gain prestige by accusing someone of something, whether it's true or not. It might be true, it might not be, but that gives you status. And now we're rewarding people for this behavior, which there was a reason for it. I mean, there were people that needed to be identified for doing crap, right? So there is, at its basis, some truth, right? But it seems to have spiraled out of control, or it may be about to spiral. It seems like it's moving in a direction that could become dangerous, unfair.
Great. Other questions? Yes.
It's been about 25 years since I've walked these halls with students. So if I recall, there was a free speech area when I was here. Is there still a free speech area, and how does that relate to campus censorship?
There is a free speech area on campus. No, there is not a free speech area anymore. I thought it was the whole area outside by the cafeteria. No, it's the whole campus. But there is a rule that they go by time and space and time, place, and manner. So you can't have free speech. You can't walk into this lecture and start shouting. That would not be a time, place, and manner. But if you're out in a public area, you can speak wherever you'd like. As long as you don't walk into a classroom or something that has it.
Good. Other? Yes.
Could it be the ones that believe that they have become enlightened, but they are becoming the puppets instead of being the enlightened ones?
Right. The puppet master. Has he become the liberator, or is Marcuse the captor? I think that Marcuse thinks that he's the liberator. He's liberating everyone. But maybe he's actually entrapping them with this new mentality. Right now, we must view everything in a certain way. We must view everything as race, or everything as gender, or everything as hierarchies are all evil, right? That's postmodernism. Hierarchies are evil, and it really kind of plays out as, well, yeah, you have a new set of blinders on us, right? We've just traded our old set for a new set.
Yes.
You say that the usual class should be political, but what really counts as political? I couldn't wait to have the journal and the publication picture would get this political.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
Publication, for example, in the speakers for journal, the publication a picture would get this like a political picture.
If you publish a picture of a gun in a journal, would that be political?
If I publish a picture of a gun in a journal.
Because you see, like, bigger class should be political, right? So if you publish an article and you have a picture of a gun, then it's not being political already. Like, what is the limit and what is political?
I don't really follow the argument about the gun, but I follow should it or should it not be political. You know, actually, honestly, I'm okay with political discussion. I'm great with political talk. I think that's healthy and fun. My concern is when it's all one direction, all one side, all the funding, everything goes one way, it's no longer discussion, it's propaganda, right? So I'm okay with a little political haggling back and forth. I think it's healthy. I just think we need to make sure that it's a fair and balanced playing field.
Excellent.
And limit, I mean, it should not be, we shouldn't have our own personal newspaper that we can publish in.
Okay, Rosa, and then the gentleman will be next.
Yeah, I just wanted to make comment about the MECHA document we used.
Yes.
It was created in 1969, so the historical context
Yes.
was a time of upheaval. I went through that, we were very angry, and that's what came out of it, that it is the history of MECHA. It's not what MECHA members are today. We have all evolved. We have all learned from each other. The other comment I wanted to make about the foundation.
I agree.
The foundation, I contribute to the foundation. It's not just public money. I contribute to the foundation because I support Chicano commencement, Chicano events. So it's not like just public money out there. It's events that we support. It's donations. Okay? I just wanted to clarify.
No, yeah, that's a great clarification. The foundation money, a lot of it is, actually I would say most of it's not private money. Most of it is public grants and funds that people have donated. It's not mostly private money.
No,
However,
I represent my point of view by donating.
I understand, and I agree with you. Your point of view is that you can donate to that foundation, and that money could go to wherever you think it should go. You can say, I want to make a scholarship for Latino students, and you can give it to Latino students. That is perfectly fine.
No, you can do that here. All services are open to all students regardless of
I'm okay with that,
background or color.
but the problem is that not all the money being spent is that kind of money, right? I mean, we hire professors to teach, and then we're giving them reassigned time. That reassigned time, that's probably public money.
Otherwise there would be no events on campus.
Well, if we're going to keep giving tons of reassigned time and stipends to one particular group and one particular person, some of it is grant money, though.
Some people write grants
Yeah.
for their particular events.
Up to you.
Okay, so I would just like to say in response to Rosa's comments about the documents being old, they are from the 1960s. They are from a historical time, but they are the guiding documents of the association. And in order to be a local campus association of MECHA, you are required to read those documents at the beginning of every meeting. Now, does local MECHA do that? I would assume not.
They don't.
And the recent changes to MECHA are just over the last couple months, and several of the articles mention that they have been racist to other groups of colors, but still do not, with the exception of one article, recognize the legitimacy of the United States, and they still do not include people of European ancestry as in their ideas. Now, do I think they should have to?
That's not
No.
true.
I've read the documents, Rosa.
Yeah, they're outdated, and there was a big conference this year.
Yes, I have read the
about
articles
debating
related.
about where Mecha's gonna go.
Yeah, so I've read those documents, and they have changed, and they have conceded that they now want to include other indigenous people of color.
They always have.
I'm just talking to you about what a MECHA-produced document said about the debate at their convention, that they would now be open to other indigenous people of culture because they themselves described the Chicano movement as oppressive to non-Mexican indigenous people. And while they did rectify that and have become more inclusive, it is still kind of a pan-indigenous movement.
Chicanos are, and Mexican Americans and Latinos and Hispanic, they have a different identity of themselves. And so that is showing itself in some of these organizations.
Right, and my point is, yay, have the freedom to do that, but we have to apply standards similarly. I want to finish and then get back to Dr. Garrett.
What does
So if we're going to...
stand for? What does MECHA, what do the letters stand for?
This,
Movimiento
Somebody knows.
Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán.
yes, thank you. So I'm stepping away. Yes, sir. You were next.
Oh, I was just gonna, I could hear that really well. When somebody's faint, some of us have ears that are as old as the rest of us. It's hard to hear. If you could at least, or kind of say what the question was, having difficulty hearing some of them.
Read the question.
All of which are really cool questions.
Yes.
Really.
Okay, good. Other questions or comments? I know a lot of you have something to say and you're hesitant. Yes?
I just wanted to inform you that MECHA actually has broken off from the national chapter of MECHA and become our own local BC chapter.
Wonderful.
Because we did not agree with a lot of the documents that
Wonderful.
national MECHA has.
Wonderful. And I've never had a bad experience with MECHA until the article was written. But, good. Next. Yes. Oh, thank you. Couldn't see you down there.
I was gonna ask, based off of kind of some of the things you were saying, and especially the call-out culture that you mentioned, how do you think that that ties into the cancel culture going on, especially on Twitter and just
Cancel culture?
Cancel culture, yes.
That's a
Are you
term I
familiar
don't
with
know.
that? Okay, so the cancel culture.
I don't tweet though.
Understand. It's basically people who, I guess, do certain things that is perceived by a large group of people, and then they're called out on Twitter, and therefore like canceled basically. So I'm trying to think of a prominent example.
So it sounds like the call out stuff.
Yeah, I think it was kind of
Publicly embarrass someone.
Yes.
Accuse them of something.
Can you repeat the question?
So he asked how, well, actually I'm not sure we got to the question yet. We were laying down the terms. So
Yes,
what's the question?
The question is just how do you think that kind of the things going on at BC pertains, or I guess adds on to the viral cancel culture going on right now?
How do the things at Bakersfield College pertain to the viral call out culture or cancel culture on Twitter?
Yes.
Okay, well, so I don't really understand this cancel culture thing, so I don't want to step in it too far. But the call-out culture, I understand, this idea of calling people out. And it happens all the time. People can be accused of being a racist or accused of being sexist or accused of doing something that's not right. And sometimes someone did something wrong and they should be, wag of the finger, right? But it sort of seems to be accelerating at a pace that's outstripping what evidence might actually substantiate. Where you have someone say, well, that's racist, and it just becomes the gut instinct that it must be because we all know everything's racist. So it takes advantage of this lack of evidence to just throw aspersions on anyone, and it can really ruin careers. I know in the last year here at BC, I can think of 2 faculty, 3 administrators, 2 faculty, 1 administrator, besides myself, who have been called out and accused of things, egregious, horrible things that have potentially derailed their careers. And I think that's a lot more dangerous than the imagined what may or may not have happened without evidence. You're going to damage some people's careers possibly with these false accusations. And that's just in the last year or so.
Yeah, that answers my question.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody over there because I haven't called anybody from over there much. Okay, yes.
I did say another question, but I was just wondering, you pointed out how individuals can also perform logical fallacies, how it's seen. What are some tips that you could recognize that can try to prevent or recognize it from others and try to not or prevent having logical
Take philosophy B9. Tips to identify logical fallacies, right? I think, you know, you have to get away from your gut response. Maybe your gut response gives you some good, but you can't make your decision on that, right? So what are some tips for identifying logical fallacies? You know, I would really point you to Professor Korsak and the philosophy department, because that is their bread and butter. I don't know how to, other than memorizing them and going over them repeatedly and maybe looking at the newspaper and go, if you watch politics, oh, politicians are rife with them, right? I mean, that's all they use. Everything out of a certain politician's mouth is just logical fallacy after fallacy. So if you can just maybe play a game and start going, now you'll piss everybody off when you start saying that's a logical fallacy. But you mean, maybe don't do it too much to your friends. But yeah, you could read the news, watch, if you listen to talk radio or news TV like MSNBC, Fox News, I mean, it's just tons of that stuff. And just pick it apart. Practice, I guess.
Try and make a drinking game of it.
Make a game.
A drinking game.
Yeah, you'll be dead.
Tina.
So I just have a question. You're asking about the difference between the chalk writings and then comparing them to the stickers. Don't you think that they were seen a little bit more offensive due to the current political climate, that maybe that's why they were attached to shooter training? It's not, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing, but to think about the current society we live in, there is an active fear that somebody may go a bit too far, being that we see shootings.
Especially a white person, like a conservative white person, right, is the fear. I agree with you that there is a different context there. I do think that context is also inflated and exaggerated. If you look at the data of who the active shooters are, Mother Jones News, which is a very liberal news organization, produced a list of all the active shooters for the last 20 years, and you can break it down by race, and you'll actually find that about 55% of the shooters are white, which is slightly less than the national population. So actually, white folks are slightly underrepresented as mass shooters. Black folks are overrepresented. Mexican Americans are way underrepresented. For some reason, Mexican Americans don't go on mass shootings. But it's easy to sort of forget the data and just look at what's been on the news lately, and you can get caught up in that emotion and hysteria. And then you might say, oh my gosh, this might be another one. I agree with you. But I don't think that it's grounded in like logical, you know, let's actually look at the data, and the data doesn't support that.
Well, and also just looking at it from, and I know you talked about fear and theory and all this, I just want to make sure that if something were to happen, Bakersfield College doesn't want to be on the other end and say we didn't.
That's true. We want to be safe. We don't want to be like, well, we should have done something, but we didn't, right? It's a fair.
Good. Yes, the gentleman.
Two guys out the door.
Okay. Does he want they want to ask a question out there by you. Is that why you had your hand up too? Okay.
Sorry. Dr. Garrett. Hello. My name is Eric, and I also came to Bakersfield College. I am of Mexican heritage. First generation, my parents were illegal. But I also get slightly concerned with the way that we have to speak openly in public. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions about how or who is that authority figure to kind of judge what is like okay for somebody to say and not somebody else in regards to maybe like the idea of a safe space.
Yeah, so who should make that decision? Well, I would point to the American experiment's great origin, right? The origin of America, we had to make a decision. When we created the American Revolution, we said we don't like the king, we don't like hierarchy of absolute power, we're going to make a system where the people have more power. We didn't go all the way to full democracy because that struck the founding fathers as just crazy. But we did try to entrust the people as in a broad base as much as we could through representatives, and it wasn't perfect, right? There was people left out. But it was far more inclusive than having that one person who's in charge, the king or the guy that climbed out of the cave, right? So I think personally that the best way to discover those things is to include as many people. Let's have an open discussion and let's say, okay, well, is that racist? Should we take that policy? What I don't think the answer is to grab a pool of like-minded people in a back room and then make declarations privately and then just roll them out as policy. That's dangerous. That's the same as having that one guy that thinks he's out of the cave. Let's grab people who think differently. Let's get that heterodox academy. Let's get folks who have different views and values and air it out and have them have a discussion about it and see what they think. That's the answer.
So do you think that it would be a good idea for BC, being that we're talking about the topic right now, that they could do like a study on it, like with like different people and say, hey, we wanna have you do this survey for us, and like maybe go in the cafeteria or somewhere on campus and say, hey, we'd like in different ethnic groups, different populations of different people, and say, hey, let's talk about this, and maybe without even putting their name on it, just anonymously, you know, only putting maybe their age groups, you know, from a ratio from say 21 or whatever whatever age group you want to do in different ratios, and then say, hey, we want to talk about this, or would you be willing to fill out the survey? Do you think that that would be something as a solution?
So the question is, should we use survey data from our campus, making sure we get a diverse age, class, race, gender, and then use that to determine policy?
That's not what I agree.
No? Is that
what you were saying?
That's what I was saying.
Oh.
I'm just saying, like, it would be part of the solution, maybe not the whole solution, but a solution.
You don't know that everybody's gonna participate. How do you know you've got a representative sample?
We'll get like the professors and different people to talk about it, you know, with their classes and stuff.
So I had a quick follow-up question. Do you mean in regards to regulating speech or just making general campus policy?
I think in regards to speech and both, actually.
Okay.
what should be allowed, kind of
Yeah.
thing?
So if you give any group or people the authority to determine who can speak, we will eventually lose our freedoms. So like you might be in the group that it's allowed right now according to how you think or what other group you're in, but eventually somebody within that group will self-cannibalize and you'll be excluded. Dr. Christina Hoff Summers, when she spoke here, she was a radical progressive liberal until she started studying critical gender theory and realized, oh my gosh, this stuff is totally self-affirming and it's bad, full of fallacies, and they kicked her out when all she wanted to do was have this conversation. And so I just want to say, I think no.
So you think that would be a bad idea then?
I would go back to the Chicago principles and say, let them all air it out.
Okay.
As offensive as it might be, it's disgusting, that's what it says, right? It's as foul as it might be. I mean, and if it's foul, we'll be like, oh, that was foul, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can all make our own decisions. I'd rather we make the decisions ourselves than an entity of some sort.
Okay.
So I want to get the gentleman, because he can get in, then we'll go here, here, and then back there.
Sort of in response to that, but also that is, there's a phrase, the tyranny of the, is it the majority? So if 51% say, this is what we're gonna do, 49% no longer get to think or say what they think, that's bothersome. And I think that's what you're addressing. And as far as being safe, people should be safe, physically, okay? But the anxiety and stress that comes from having to deal with somebody else's idea and argue with it, that's life, folks, you know, and you're gonna come out of here, if you engage in this process, ready to see the logical fallacies, figure out what the politicians are saying, understand the stupid ads that you see. You're gonna be in a far better position to make judgments about yourself, the people around you, and your voting, and if you decide to run for office or something, well, I don't know if you're gonna be able to do it if you're that honest. I'm not sure you're gonna be able to run for office if you're that honest.
Empowerment,
Yes.
Do you think we're stripping power from words while we're trying to power other words?
Do I think we're stripping power from words by stripping,
While we're also trying to empower other
while
words.
empowering other words? So like say stripping power from the accusation of racism while empowering social Marxism?
Yes.
Right? So am I stripping power from racism as an accusation while empowering the term social Marxism? I think that's a fair critique. I think I'm saying, hey, racism's a little overused, and sometimes it really is happening, but sometimes it's not. And you know, this other word that was silenced needs to get also discussed. So I do feel like there was an imbalance, and I am trying to sort of get it back on the table so that we can discuss what was actually written. So I suppose your critique, I don't disagree with it.
So let me get, I think you're Moya's mom, right?
Yeah. I'm wondering, the lady over there, the gentleman over there, if I heard them correctly, were discussing the value of acceptable free speech and what was said, what was determined by the group as acceptable. When we began today, you pointed out that if someone should say something that was not acceptable, they would be summarily removed. Over there as a policeman, and there's another one here somewhere, I assume to protect us, somebody, me, from somebody else's free speech. I'm just wondering what this whole thing is about. Free speech is judged by whom? You, that member of the tribe, that member of the tribe. Which tribe? Indigenous tribe? Is that the Indians? Is that the Eskimos? Oh, no, those are those people who are running around being called Mexicans who used to live here and were in California. They certainly were indigenous, yet they were kind of Mexican, I guess. Who's determining free speech, and who is castigating them or controlling them? Maybe you are, maybe those policemen are. I'm worried. Excellent. I'm worried about Donald Trump being able to be free to speak whatever he did.
So I don't believe that the police, that the campus security are here to have anything to do with speech. They have no orders to stop anyone from speaking. They're here for violence, for actual violence, physical violence.
Violence caused by
Not violence of I feel hurt or violence of that's hurtful, but physical violence. As far as folks becoming removed, that is removed because they do not meet the campus standard of, Nikki used those words, time, place, manner. If they're completely disruptive and disallowing anyone else's speech, then they get removed.
I guess your answer means I did not express what I meant clearly enough. I think free speech is acceptable by the beholder, and what a person says is accepted or rejected. And perhaps we need to have a little bit more learning, a little bit more understanding.
Yeah, I agree that it can be subjective and folks might feel like this is a warranted free speech, but this should not be allowed. And that's the problem. So we open the gates and we allow lots of folks to speak.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to move on to the next one, and if we have time, we'll come back to you.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
In the early days of the Republic, Thomas Jefferson observed that the elected officials coming to Washington, D.C., they would divide based on their living and social arrangements into intractable blocks. So what we experience now, I would common remark, is not that uncommon to what the nation saw at its early days of founding. His solution was informal social gatherings. So as an alumnus of Bakersfield College, I would make the recommendation that it's not only about free speech in the academy, but it's about the own relationships, the people that you socialize with, and how you open yourself up to diversity around ideology at your dinner table that will ultimately bubble up into a thriving and intellectually diverse and stimulating university and college.
That is a wonderful comment. That should have been nothing. Excellent. There's a great book Alan Bowler introduced me to just last year. Bowling Alone, I think it's called, right? But talks about how we now bowl alone. We used to bowl together. We used to go out and hang out together. And then you learn about politics later, but you could overcome that because you had a relationship, right? You just read Bowling Alone recently, didn't you?
No.
You're like nodding your head.
Many years ago.
Okay, so yeah, so that's, I agree with you, absolutely, that we need more cross-cutting social interaction. You know, my background is Native American history, and I can tell you, looking at Native American tribes, for example, many tribes are broken into gender roles, right? There's clan roles, and those different people, different clans, and then there's moiety roles, and there's different of those, and they're all cross-cutting, and they're designed to create structure and support. But in our culture, we've sort of become more individual, like it's me and it's mine, and now we're starting to clump into my tribe, and our view and your view, and it's, yeah. I agree, the answer, one of the great answers is engage with people that are different than you, and maybe even put politics off to the side for like, you know, a little while while you build your relationship.
Reggie?
All right. You rightly note that I deeply prize free speech.
You are wonderful, Reggie.
It also raises tricky issues for the concept of responsible speech.
Yeah.
Cliche example, but an important one. Legally, you speech. Probably one of the big ones on campus. Okay, I'm not going to say the only ones that are competition, but one of the big ones, right? But still, how do you tease out or relate the concept of free speech and responsible speech? And I'm so glad I didn't give this talk because I don't want to answer that.
Yeah, I don't want to answer that. I don't have an answer. I would turn to our political science professors really for the answer, because I know there's a legal answer, and it's along those lines of the no bomb on a plane and no fire in a theater. But I don't know what the legal line is, what that line is. My preference would be to keep it as open as possible to the point of inciting.
What do you, how do you relate those concepts?
Yeah, obviously some speech could lead to violence, right? I mean, it does crush social Marxism stuck in the UPNS office on a Just Nieto conference poster. Does that lead to violence? I don't think, that's pretty distant removed, right? Now, if you show up at the Democratic National Convention or Republican National Convention and you have the opposite side's guy and you're marching through the lines, you're probably going to get beat, right? That could cause, so I don't know, what's the boundary? I don't know.
To me, that's one of the that's one of the rubs of this whole issue. If it's just words, go for it. On a certain level. Maybe even qualifications there. But there is a relationship oftentimes between speaking and other people doing it.
Jason, and then we'll get the young lady here. Did you have
I do know it has something to do with being in a crowd that's live and active. So like if you stuck it on a sign and then 3 weeks later we notice it, it's not going to qualify for that sort of. To the immediate context.
I take it you're pushing against, and importantly so.
Immediate context. Like the immediate crowd that's there.
1969 versus 2 months ago, for instance. Right, maybe. Or, pick your.
Yeah, but it's not really 1969, it's last year. It's active up until very recent.
Just as an example, just the context versus the speech.
Or do we just have a responsibility not to respond with violence based on other people's words? Is that what it really comes down to? I am responsible for my actions, and if somebody says something that incites me or angers me, it is up to me how I react. Anyways,
based on what Reggie was saying a moment ago, it reminded me of some of the history of the late 1800s with the social reform movements, the anarchist movements, the Wobblies, and groups like that. Specifically, there was a division that was deliberately chosen to take advantage of that gray area, and there were people who, the phrasing was, they would go out there, they'd be the inflammatory speakers, and they would say, it would be good if something like this happened, but they wouldn't say, go do this.
Wow, Bill Hayward.
And then you have others who would act on it, and the distinction was propagation of the deed versus propagation of the word, and you couldn't be arrested and tried for propagation of the word because you didn't give a command to someone. And that's that gray area where they had to work out those details about fire in a theater and things of that nature. So it is a context-based issue. How are you doing it? How are you leading people?
This is more of a statement. Because of all the diversity, we're known to be a melting pot, but we're not really a melting pot. We're more like a salad bowl. We can't really mix with all the opinions. The United States didn't start out as a country, it started out as states with their own ideas, and those states were their own countries until they were unified.
I don't know, not the type to Reggie question. So, if say, okay, what you say can incite somebody to violence, and then that causes the action, so you put the solid in words, okay? Then, to me that's analogous to kind of like a student saying, well, I don't like like, it opens a door that, so I guess that the question is, isn't it built into the law already? Like, if somebody says something and then somebody else does something, the law will prosecute that person. So that's the question I have. Is it already built into the Constitution? Like, is it already built into the law? I'm not American, so I guess probably the science country.
You're leaving my area entirely, so I could speculate up here, but the law is not my.
Response to that, I believe the difference would be that when you say it's not already in the law, because when you say fire in a building, we all know that fire means we should, in a sense, riot. But when someone says, "Oh, racist," you're not incited to anything. There is no contextual response of, oh, we should beat that person because they're a racist. It's more so.
Thank you. Thank goodness.
Well, the comment about how the melting pot concept, the phrasing I remember reading about, I don't know, 15 years ago was more of an analogy of a fondue pot where all the pieces melt on the edges and stick together, but the centers don't completely change and mix and swirl together. And that was one way of looking at the American experiment, was we are getting sticky, we are starting to absorb, but there's still some cores that haven't completely changed yet. Just a thought, because I'm hungry.
Moya, did you have a question? Oh, okay, I thought you had your hand up. No. Okay. Yes, and then yes.
I was just curious if you feel like social media is guilty of violating ex post facto law and incriminating things that people may not have really known or been taught that were wrong at the time, but committed, and yes, they were wrong, but like the attack against them was like exponentially more than it would have been in the context of the crime.
So like finding some comedian that made a comment 20 years ago and then running him out of his career because he made a joke about gays, which 20 years ago would have happened, today would be a no. And so now he's held accountable for the new standard being applied to old actions, which is something we talk about in history all the time. I mean, tread carefully about judging the past, because you know that grandma's racist, right? Like, she is, a lot of your grandmas, and your grandkids are going to look at you and be like, well, you're whatever it is that in 100 years from now is wrong anymore. So be cautious, I think. Be a little bit more generous, maybe, and trust. I mean, I'm not saying go ahead and be a racist because grandma's a racist, but be understanding that it's a different time, and and so maybe we don't say the comedian should make gay jokes. Maybe but ruining his career over something that happened 20 years ago, or that grandma did.
Recognize it's wrong.
Recognize it's wrong, but
teach that it's wrong.
But destroy them entirely as an example is probably a little much.
That's the cancel culture.
No, that's cancel culture. Destroy them entirely. Okay, now I understand the cancel culture. Yeah, I don't like the word that.
I'm digging up all that was in the past because of one thing that they did in the present.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so I think we had Paul and then Mike.
Two things, Matt. One of the things we talked about was just a few minutes ago that something about we don't go bowling together anymore. There's bowling on Thursdays. Over at the Boulevard at 4, and it counts for professional development. But I think we agree to disagree. There's a lot of people I disagree with on campus. I like tremendously. I don't bowl, but we go drinking. But there's that civil discourse that's lost. I mean, if I could kind of tie it all in, just be nice. Be nice to each other. You can still disagree and still go bowling. One of the problems that I kind of had with your talk, it was obviously it's confrontational, maybe a little too personal, I guess, in that respect. But I do respect you for coming up here and doing that, knowing that you're going to have colleagues that were none too thrilled about it. You know, you're the one kicking in the door, as it were. But I think we still bowl together.
Yeah, bicycle or
So we'll take two final comments, one from Mike and then one from Sal. But if you could please wait until you leave unless you're catching the bus so that their questions aren't interrupted.
From a psychological standpoint, I think it basically says more about the someone who commits the violence like than the person that says something that is nice to you. So where do you draw the line as this person you're giving this thing? Like where do you draw the line on what's acceptable free speech?
So that's going back to the same question that Reggie had of what's the line between speech and the violence that ensues?
Do you personally have like lines?
Do I personally have a line? my sense and feeling, and I'm not 100% committed to it because I'm just kind of spitballing here. My sense and feeling would be that line would be having to do with immediacy. If there is an immediate crowd, and there will be an immediate response, and emotions will run the day, and no one has a chance to think because they're BOOM! Then okay, that's a little different than, yesterday someone called you a racist, or yesterday someone called you social Marxist. Okay, and it's sort of a calmer context, and you can think about this, and you'd be like, I disagree. If you commit violence after that, there's a little bit. So to me, I feel like immediacy plays a role, but I don't really know what the law is on this. I'm speculating.
Sorry, question. Sal.
Yeah. With regard to the way that you unpacked it, it's interesting. Certainly, people can be grabbed by it. It's one way of doing it logically, right? That makes sense, but it's not the only way. And some of these, I think, things that were listed. I mean, I'm new to the area, but some of these things that were appended to posters and lights and things like this. You're not the arbiter of whether or not these are racist. You made that clear. But your analysis of it and the way that you, I guess, tallied what was considered, what could not be considered.
That was arbitrary.
Sure, and that's fine. But it doesn't preclude the fact that some people, certainly people of color, could see into these as not only threatening but violent forms of violence. And there are many forms of violence. By throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, I think it says a little less about the analysis. It says, these ones didn't work in my analysis, and thus they can't, they may be beyond the pale with regard to what I'm trying to present here, because then you sort of went down into your own deep dive as to how it affected you. And in doing so, some of the authors that you had posted up there, whether it's Fanon or Foucault, I think they were mischaracterized in some sense. And I'm not trying to make this personal, but if this is the only place that some people hear the term postmodernism and get your reductionist,
you're right.
Or they hear Marcuse as this character, I think you're missing some of the great values that these people have kind of contributed to the academy, the Frankfurt School, from Adorno. These people have inspired not only movements and revolutions, but they've made it better for people of color. Angela Davis is one of my heroes, and without a Marcuse, there'd be no Davis, in some respect.
I agree.
That's it. I'm not. It's not.
No, I agree.
I agree.
I agree that I gave them a short.
I don't like to be talked
I gave them a little.
As a person of color, I'd like to. When I'm done,
you have exceeded time. You kept going, so that's why I said.
Well,
and then he says a person of color, which invokes like some sort of racial power structure.
Well,
as a person of color.
Yeah, well, I am.
Sequel.
So I agree with your observation that I very briefly covered some of those things, very briefly, and it was not at all inclusive because I couldn't fit it all in. I would love to do 3 of these and break that into 3 separate lectures and spend more time on it.
You also said they had very favorable impact in multiple areas.
Yeah. And I'm trained in that, but that's where I come from. That's my training, is that background. So I see some of that, and that's why you look in my bookshelves, and that's where my training comes from. So I see value in there as well. But I also see problems that come from any ideology, no matter how good it is. If it's the only one, and then we have a new.
I agree wholeheartedly, but if that's the only time you hear it in this lecture, then you go home, and then the rest of your week you're in the natural sciences, and you got this class, you got a kid to take care of, and someone says Michel Foucault or Pierre Bourdieu, I'm not sure why he was even in that right side of it. Then you say, I remember that from this. And that can't be the only thing. You have to take that second deep dive into the library and find some of these people. It could be valuable to their careers and their lives.
I think that's why we're all in college. Honestly, if I was a student and that was my public exposure, I should give them that.
Bourdieu is, I've written on Bourdieu. I mean, not a lot, but I've written, I value Bourdieu.
I have too, we come from the similar.
So, I totally agree with you, these things have value. I just worry when one methodology becomes the only methodology. Where's the people that are inspired by Bacon and, I don't know, I'm not trained in that side, so I don't really know it, honestly. And that's the problem, I can only use my own side's analysis to pick on that side that I'm trained in. But I don't know those are voices. I would love if we had those kind of voices. I just don't know them that well. So I have to stick on the ones I do know.
So do you think we have another hand over here? Yes.
I understand what he means by you're not giving the full background of everyone, but I think it's also up to us to look up those people and read behind it, just like with any other ideology or anything in general. It should be up to not only him to give us some of their intellectual standing, but up to us to read behind whatever it is that he's presenting and form our ideas.
Yeah, my primary goal was to simply draw the line and to give as little as possible. It wasn't, because I don't have enough time. So what is necessary to draw, connect the dots. And so that means I left out a lot of information that I didn't share today on all sorts of things besides those scholars. I left out a whole bunch of details that they were interesting, I thought, but I didn't think they were necessary to make the argument in the time that we had.
If Vaughn, Barajas, and Rosales have time, would you be willing to do something like this again with a debate in this kind of setting?
Absolutely.
Do you think they would have time?
I hope that they would.
That's a judgment for them to make.
Is there anybody else? Thank you, Dr. Garrett.